The coronavirus is scary, but a group of determined humans working together is even scarier. Think of all the amazing things humans have accomplished when we have a singular goal. We put humans on the moon and then brought them back safely. We've connected nearly every human on the planet electronically with the internet. We've sequenced all 3 billion base pairs of the human genome in small fragments and then pieced it all together accurately. Netflix has a library of TV shows that you can now stream for 125 million hours straight. Many of you probably are and should be doing that right now. My point is, we've handled more, and we can handle this. In Chapter 1, we learned about our shared enemy. In this chapter, we're going to learn about ourselves and how our bodies react to an invasion. By the end of the lesson, I want you to be able to explain how your immune system normally reacts to invaders and how the COVID-19 virus interrupts those normal operations. By and large, the role of your immune system is to protect you from things that are not you. As far as simplicity goes, though, that's about where it ends. Because unlike the digestive system, which has a very specific set of organs in specific spots and a pretty linear trajectory, food goes in, waste comes out, the immune system is kind of everywhere. While there are a couple organs that we associate with the immune system, like your lymph nodes and your bone marrow, your immune system is made up of dozens of specific cell types that freely roam your body like sentinels and communicate using small protein signals called cytokines. If there's any word I want you to walk away knowing today, it's cytokines. They're a huge group of signaling molecules that are used by all of your cells, but since your cells in your immune system are so spread out, they're even more important for those cells. Some of the most important cytokines I'll talk about are interferons and interleukins. Keep your ears open for those terms. Because your immune system is so big and complex, we'll break it up into two parts: the innate immune system and the adaptive immune system. Innate means intrinsic or standard, so it's the elements that are there for everyone. The adaptive or acquired immune system, on the other hand, grows with you. So let's take a look at how the innate and adaptive immune system interact with an example of a normal response. For this example, let's pretend you get infected with a random dumb virus. Your first layer of protection is your skin, and all the other epithelial cells that line the entrances to your body. Up your nose, down your throat, your genitals. All of these epithelial cells produce some kind of mucus that traps foreign particles and helps to start breaking them down. This is partially why dry weather helps spread disease. Everyone's mucus linings are all dried up. But let's say your random dumb virus is smarter than the average particle, and it gets itself into your cells, it unloads its genetic material, and it sets up shop just like we learned about in Chapter 1. That cell will actually recognize that something is wrong and start to send out type 1 interferon. It's cell equivalent to an alarm system. Type 1 interferons do a lot of things. First, they signal all the neighboring cells, allowing them to shield themselves so that they're more protected from the virus. Then, they help recruit both the innate and adaptive immune system to help. Let's pause for a second and get to know some of these characters before we go on. The macrophage. If we had to decide on the leader of this squad, this guy would be it. The cells constantly patrol your body and are more prevalent in areas of high infection, like your stomach and your lungs. Their name literally means big eater. And when they encounter an antigen, they eat it using a process called phagocytosis, and then digest it with an impressive arsenal of chemicals. A neutrophil, a younger, smaller, shorter-lived version of the macrophage. Normally found and recruited after the foreign particle is detected, these cells are the most abundant cell type found in areas of infection, and are able to slip into places that the macrophage would have trouble with. Your natural killer cells. These are your ruthless, trusty bodyguards. They constantly monitor your cells, making sure that they're you. If your cells start to express any viral proteins, your natural killer cells gently persuade those cells to kill themselves. Yikes. Last but not least, the dendritic cell. These cells are your immune system's version of a police APB. They engulf particles like the macrophage and then present pieces of it on their surface to show members of the adaptive immune system. The adaptive immune system is mainly made up of T cells and B cells, and these guys are your heavy hitters. Cytotoxic T cells are nukes. Once they're trained to recognize the enemy, they'll kill indiscriminately. Some T cells patrol your tissues looking for viral proteins sticking out from the cell membranes, just like the natural killer cell, and then release enough cellular toxins to wipe out the whole area, your cells included. An important cousin of the cytotoxic T cell is the T helper cell. The T helper cell also recognizes viral epitopes, but then uses them to teach the B cells what they look like. B cells are your snipers. Once they're trained to recognize the enemy, they design specialty bullets called antibodies for each pathogen they encounter. these antibodies stick to the pathogen and slow them down enough for the macrophage and neutrophils to come and eat them. Okay, so once the virus starts replicating and the interferon alarm system goes off, a lot of things happen at once. It's almost like if a building caught fire. Once it gets big enough to be noticed and for an alarm to go off, the fire department, the police, and the paramedics would all be alerted somehow and all act independently to help. Once the viral infection gets large enough, the interferon alarm signals both the natural killer cells and the T cells to come and investigate. While the natural killer cells sniff out infected cells and trigger a suicide pathway, the T cells come and blast the entire area with cytotoxins. This keeps these cells from producing any more viral particles, but there are still viruses outside of the cell. So when the natural killer cells and the T cells are at work, macrophages come along and gobble up all the foreign particles they can from outside the cell. Once they eat and digest the virus, they go on full alert and begin firing off more alarm cytokines. Some of the cytokines cause a fever, your body's way of burning the virus out. Other cytokines cause blood vessels near the area to enlarge, leading it to swell, turn red, and get warm. Or in other words, it becomes inflamed. Other cytokines are chemoattractants for the rest of the innate immune system. Essentially what the macrophage has done is rerouted traffic and called for backup. The inflammation can push on pain nerves, causing them to send pain signals to your brain. And if these pain signals come from your lungs, you involuntarily cough. At this point, squadrons of neutrophils and dendritic cells come to help, hitching a ride through the inflammation. While the neutrophils eat viruses, both the dendritic cells and the T helper cells go and present pieces of the virus to the B cells. This causes them to replicate and start producing antibodies. This is arguably the most important part of the whole process. The antibodies that the B cells make can neutralize thousands of viruses at a time. The memory B cells formed after the infection cleared will continue to provide protection from the virus for years. I'll talk more about this critical stage in a later video. You really could not invent a better way to fend off microscopic attacks. But, as effective as it is, the pathogens you're fighting have spent billions of years evolving strategies to evade even the best immune systems. In the next part, I'll explain how the Covid-19 virus manages to evade the immune system and how that can sometimes lead to some very serious complications. If you remember from Chapter 1, the Covid-19 virus sets up a replication transcription complex near the nucleus of the cell that it invades, and it's made up of 27 individual proteins that all do different things. Some of them are responsible for viral replication, some break down proteins, and others are responsible for blocking the interferon signals from the invaded cell. Okay, everyone try and remember right now. What was the role of those interferons? That's right, it's the cell's alarm system. So the COVID-19 virus is basically able to disarm our alarm system. That eliminates an entire branch of the immune response, allowing infected cells to stay alive and slowing down the T cells. The COVID-19 virus is so good at evading the immune system, it sometimes takes up to 2 weeks for your macrophage to stumble on the infection. By the time the macrophage recognizes it, it's everywhere. In a lot of cases, the pro-inflammatory cytokines are all released at once in an event called a cytokine storm, and the inflammatory response is really severe. This can cause the growing blood vessels to allow water to infiltrate the alveolar tissue, causing pneumonia. In about 1% of cases, the inflammation pushes too hard on the lung tissue, clotting blood vessels in an effort to keep the virus from entering the blood. The technical term for this is sepsis. Too much of this can cause multiple organ failure, and in many cases, death. It's a pretty scary outcome, I know. Is everybody doing okay? The thing I have to remind myself is that the virus is not inherently evil. It doesn't hold any grudges or personal vendettas. It simply wants to live long enough to replicate. This virus is just really good at evading the immune system long enough to replicate. In more ways than one, it's our inflammatory response that causes the biggest problems. So where do we go from here? In words of Mr. Rogers, when I was a young boy and saw scary things on the news, my mother would always say, "Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping." Next time we'll look for the helpers. We'll look at how the scientists, medical professionals, epidemiologists, and civic leaders are showing that a group of determined humans shouldn't be messed with. Until next time, stay calm, stay home, and wash your hands.